Boys, it's official, the first episode of the Wrong Opinion podcast. Welcome to the first episode of the Wrong Opinion, the podcast where we talk about mental health and why it's sometimes okay to have the wrong opinion. I'm Jeremy, and today I'm here with my co-hosts Mavrik and Steven. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, gladly. So I'm Steven, and I'm also co-hosts with Jeremy and Mavrik as well. And I'm really excited to talk about mental health and how we cope or deal with stress. So I'm really excited to be in this podcast as well. How about you, Mavrik?
Yeah, hi. I'm Mavrik. I'm also a co-host on the Wrong Opinion podcast. Like Steven said, I'm also very excited to talk about mental health because it's something that's very prevalent, especially within like young teens and young people in general these days. So I feel like it's very good to gain some insight on what you can do to alleviate stress, reduce it, etc.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think before we begin, I think we should probably discuss the purpose of this podcast. And I think let's kind of start with the name. We kind of create this name as to represent, I guess, a kind of nihilistic mindset, which kind of contrasts with the stress we may feel in our daily lives. Like it doesn't really matter what we believe in the moment, even if it's wrong, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. And like as long as we learn and improve, it's all good. And
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, a part of this podcast we wanted to explore was how we each dealt with stress in our own way and kind of reflect on it. Perhaps talking about it could help others deal with their own stress or even help them evaluate their own stress management techniques. In a way, talking about stress is a way to cope with stress in its own way.
Yes, I agree. And I think like one of the major factors of this is like the stress relates to the fight or flight factor because there's like sudden or like ongoing stresses that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And I think like on a scientific level, that just makes us have like negative effects on our health. Like for example, we may have increased blood pressure or may not be able to rest as well. But all these things affect the way we think as well. And so it not only affects us psychologically, but also affects us physically. And that's why it's so important for us to like manage the balance between stress and our own daily lives in order to understand how we can deal with stress better.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think how we cope with stress is also a big factor into this. So I guess segueing, how do you guys normally deal with stress? I guess kind of like hobbies and those stuff. For me, I like reading novels. Oh, sorry, Maverick.
No,
Yeah, go.
I was just about to ask you, Jeremy, how you dealt with it, but it seems like I interrupted you. My bad. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So for me, like I like reading novels, and then something I also enjoy doing is line dance, which is, I guess some people wouldn't know, but it's this thing that you kind of perform during Chinese New Year's, and it's pretty fun to perform.
Yeah, it seems interesting for sure. Like, for example, I think lion dancing is a really excellent way of coping with chronic stress because it not only rebalances the way you work, but also shows your own like inner passions and hobbies. Like, I think lion dance is awesome because it not only connects our cultures, but also with our own inner desires of being able to express our wildest emotions and wildest personalities. And I think it's really nice that you can express your creative thinking through this form of like dance because dance is an art.
Yeah, for sure. I do agree with what you said, Steven, and I have the same sentiment as well. I wouldn't say line dance is a type of exercise, but I have heard that it's really not exactly taxing, but it gets you active. It allows you to again, I don't want to say exercise because I don't think
It
it is a
it
type of
is
exercise.
taxing. It is taxing.
It is taxing, but it's not exercise. I mean, you're
It's
still
no,
active.
no,
You're
it
still
is it is
active, right?
exercise. It's the same
Oh,
as like a martial art.
oh, okay. Okay,
Yes,
okay.
because you need some form of gymnastic skill incorporated into it. Like in line dancing, sometimes people have to stack on one another to create the illusion that the lion is, like per se, standing on two legs. And this requires not only coordination, but also a very delicate balance between cooperation and mutual understanding. Because you cannot talk during the lion dance, basically,
Yeah.
unless you want people to hear.
hmm Yeah,
Dude,
you're
how do
right.
you know so much about this?
Oh, because
You've done
well,
your
I just
research.
think it's very interesting, and I know that Maverick and I also grew up watching lion dances, and so we know that this is very interesting. And I really liked it because as a kid, they always flung like pieces of cabbage, which is a tradition. And I thought it was really interesting to see how they worked together and cooperated. And overall, that was a very excellent way to alleviate stress because everybody was lively and happy during the Lunar New Year.
Yeah. I
That's
mean, for
that's
me,
actually yeah, that's actually the reason why I started line dance. Like I saw the performances as a kid, and I wanted to do it myself.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into it.
to be honest, when when I was still a child, I didn't see many lion dances, whether in person or on the media. But the ones I did see, there were just people under the lion thing. How do you call it? um,
Suit? I don't know.
yeah, the lion suit, I guess. They were just like walking around in like a serpentine pattern. I never saw anybody like juggle cabbages or like stack up on each other. Maybe it's because I didn't watch as much TV when I was still a child. But I've never seen that, so I'm not as familiar with lion dancing. So that's probably why I didn't know that you had to have like some form of
Oh,
acrobatic skill.
Wait.
So,
To clarify, Maverick, how many people do you think go under one line?
yeah, just to make sure we're
oh,
on the same page.
like four-ish, five? I don't know, man.
Okay, I think you're talking
I
about
think it's,
dragon dancing.
yeah, that's dragon
Oh,
dancing. But don't
oh,
worry,
wait.
yeah, that's also another unique form. For example, dragon dancing actually is slightly different because instead of being inside the body, you hold poles, and the
Right.
poles are part of the dragon, which is why you create this epic serpentine pattern. So, for example, as you can clearly imagine, dragon dancing is very unique compared to lion dancing, but they both express the same forms and desires.
Well,
Granted,
now I
lion
just feel kind
dancing
of
is
dumb.
very unique.
Now I
Pardon
just feel
me?
kind of dumb, but that may be because of stress. That may be because of stress because um I mean the last few weeks there have been like numerous assignments that have been assigned to me, and I've been working on those assignments with due diligence, so maybe the stress is catching up.
It's
See,
it's
that
actually it's actually a really common mistake to make. Like I've been told so many times, like during line dancing, right? Like, oh, look at the dragon, right?
bro, this is my culture we're talking about, and I still mess it up. Come on, man. That's
Okay,
gotta be
yeah. No, normally it's people who are not Chinese who call us dragons.
there's probably some form of irony in there.
But that's fine. That means you can learn. And I'm telling you, Maverick, because you've never seen like uh traditional Chinese lion dancing, like you should look at the way they dance, like the stacking on top of each other, the cabbages, all of those are like staple values within the traditional Lunar New Year culture.
Yes.
And there are like different forms of lions too. Like there are different colors. And if you get to experience it in person, I'm telling you, it's very energetic and you'll just forget about all of your worries and stresses.
I
Plus,
don't
this
think
is
I
why
have
it's called the wrong opinion.
Yeah, everything's okay in this podcast.
I don't think I have the strength. Not maybe not physically, maybe mentally, but not physically to just line dance for how many hours? How many hours do you usually dance, Jeremy?
Well, okay,
Like precisely.
for a normal show, it's normally not that long.
Hmm.
Maybe it depends on the occasion because there's different routines for different occasions. I'd say I don't know,
Right.
15 minutes maybe. Some
15.
because some shows are like a lot longer than others. Maybe for
Hmm.
like a wedding or something, right? While
Right.
other shows are like a lot shorter because like you're just going into a small store during Chinese New Year's.
Hmm.
So it really depends. But the thing is, during a line dance, right? Most people wouldn't notice it, but the person so we have two positions in the line, the head and the tail,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
and most would say probably the head might be more tiring, but the tail, because you're like crouched down in like the same stance and you have to stay down or else it looks like the tail is going upwards for some weird reason,
Right.
right? So they're both tiring in their own way, so you can actually switch between the head and tail and most people probably wouldn't notice.
I see.
And it's
and
very,
then
yeah, I agree.
and then during the like really long shows, right, you'll normally have a few people on standby that can sub in whenever you need it.
Hmm.
Normally those shows are like
Yeah, for
there are
example.
multiple lines and it's
Mhm.
much more chaotic and you can just switch in whenever you want
Right.
and most people wouldn't really notice too much.
Yeah.
Stephen, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, there are like various contraptions within the head. Like in the lion dance, the lion blinks, and that just makes the lion feel much more realistic and it comes to life. And this coordination between two people making like the lion appear as a real living thing is really it's really awesome in my opinion. And so the head could be pretty tiring sometimes, especially since the upper half of the front person needs to manage the mouth opening up and down and also the blinking eyes. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, no, like I think a lot of times most line dancers and the people really focus on the acrobatic portion, right? But
Mhm.
I really like the story that you can tell with the line through the blinking and I guess the different emotions that can be shown through the line and the dance. I think a lot of the times people are more impressed by the acrobatic stuff, but I think for example for weddings, right? It can become much more charming if you tell a story of like the lines themselves trying to court each other, trying
Yeah.
to date each other, and I think that can make the line dance much more memorable for that specific wedding.
I agree. And like lion dancing, it's technically very beneficial to not just yourself when relieving stress, but on a greater scale, everyone else. Right? Because when you're doing a show or displaying the way that you dance, it not only shows other people your story, but also allows them to connect. And I think relating back to our podcast, I think it's very important to show ways to relieve one's own stress, but also have like a very positive effect on other people to relieve their stress as well. So that's a very nice experience you have, Jeremy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with Steven on this. Because when it doesn't matter if it's an adult or a child, it's ageless. You don't need to be a certain age to enjoy a lion dance because either way, you will still be amazed each and every single time you view like one of the lions blink or one of the mouth opens or and closes and it just looks at you and it just looks around. It just looks very lively and it brings joy, it brings happiness, it brings bewilderment even. So
yeah,
Yeah.
I think yeah the interactions between a line and the audience is pretty fun to do. Lots of
mhm.
people like petting the line as well.
Yeah, yeah. I remember petting a lion as a kid. And I really like the drum beats as well. Is it true that the drum beats like help the lion create like a rhythmic movement? Or is that also for like, just for the overall atmosphere and liveliness?
So certain routines like the drum kind of you follow the drum beat and then okay no. Let me explain it this way, right? Remember when you said like the line has to communicate with like the people, right?
Yeah.
The drum beat and the music is a way for the I guess people to communicate with the lion, and for the lions can also communicate with the drum beat using certain moves, right? They can signal the drum beat to do something specific, and then the drum can follow the line. However, other times, right, the line might follow the drum. So it's kind of this interesting communication aspect between the line and the music.
hmm
I see.
Yeah, that's true. Like for example, Chinese line dancing has existed for such a long time. So obviously there are different forms of like line dancing. Like for example, long ago, Chinese lion dancers they wore masks to represent the lions. But now since we have much more advanced technology, we can use like semi-advanced ways to communicate. Like for example, the lions I last time saw at a local mall, they danced on the like for example these metal poles and it's really acrobatic because it feels like a actual lion is like performing acrobatic feats and that one is really unique because it just shows us how art can like evolve over time and the ways of like for example dealing with stress or relieving stress can also evolve over time.
For sure, for sure. Art is
Yeah,
a very good way to alleviate stress, and line dancing is among many of the arts that can do so.
Mhm.
you guys want to talk about the arts you guys do?
Yeah, gladly. Okay. So I really like to make digital art. And before I was a physical art maker, like in that term, it means I like using just a pencil and also working with watercolor and just drawing things I'm really passionate about. As a
Mhm.
child, I really liked to draw ocean animals. But then since like a couple years ago, I like drawing dinosaurs as well as sharks because I felt like those animals were really awesome and misunderstood. However, in recent times, I've drawn video game art because I'm really passionate about a certain video game, and there are different creatures and also characters within that game that really bring it to life. And I wanted to try like expressing those characters in my own art styles to see how I can explore the different forms of media that art can express. And I'm sure Maverick feels the same thing about some of his forms of art as well.
Yes. Are you trying to actively avoid the name of the game?
Yeah, because I don't think it really matters for the name, but more so like the overall meaning of the game. Some of our viewers within the podcast may not understand the purpose of the game, but they can resonate or understand like why that game is so meaningful to me.
Right. Yeah, I
I
mean, if it resonates within us, that's fine by itself. People don't need to know about the game itself.
I think we could talk
Um,
about the game.
could we?
I think
I mean,
for the more
for one, I like to play video games when I'm stressed, and I usually take breaks in between like work sessions in order to play some video games on my computer and on my phone because there are a few like major games that I play on both devices. But for my mobile games, the same game that Steven has mentioned, and there's just even though I've pretty much cleared the entire game up to the current version,
Yeah.
I still Steven can relate to.
Mhm.
I still play it for like the farming stages, which is just stages that you play in order to get resources to level up your characters or to improve them in some way, shape, or form. Um, Currently there's this one farming stage that's currently on. It's one of the newer ones, and I just like to play it because I don't know, a few minutes of just playing the game can just make me less stressed. It just makes me feel more relaxed because I'm focusing on the game itself and I'm not focusing on the actual assignments or homework that I was like working on before I started playing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I 100% agree. And speaking of this like stage that we both play on, like the most recent one, that one is
Mhm.
actually driving me like it's driving me nuts or driving me insane because that one is extremely difficult. But that in a way, it's still dealing with stress because even though that stage itself is stressful, in a way, that's something I'm still passionate about. It's not something that will leave a heavy impact on me or remind me of certain consequences. And so when dealing with that stress, in a way, we're not dealing with like a heavier stress from somewhere else, right, Maverick?
Yes, I've heard from the community that it's one of the most difficult stages within the game, and well, that just puts a lot of pressure on people who play it, and it
Hmm.
just puts a lot of stress on people who play it as well. However, um, if you beat it, then all of your stress is gone. Like the stress that you encountered per se within the battle, it would just all be gone once you're done this stage.
True.
So
Yeah.
honestly, it's worth playing. It's worth playing because, well, you have stress. You play the stage, one of the hardest in the game. You get a bit more stressed, but then after you beat the stressful stage, all the stress
Everything's
just
gone.
goes
Yeah.
away. It's worth it, in my opinion. It's worth
Mhm.
it.
It is. And I'm not sure if our viewers understand the context, but just to know the fact that Maverick and I experienced zombie penguins, and that definitely sounds much more stressful than one can possibly imagine.
There
I'm
is like no context for that, but
Hopefully, they understand. Yes.
they will not.
Oh
I
well,
think
but yeah,
I think ultimately for me, it's kind of just a form of escapism where you're kind of just escaping all the other stress and kind of going into your own little world and not having to deal with, I guess, the things that are making you feel stressed.
yeah,
And
precisely.
Yeah, again, it's like a specific focus on that video game that we were talking about instead of our homework or assignments. So
and
you're right.
sometimes that can be beneficial. But at the same time, right, you're not kind of confronting the problem in itself. And it could sometimes cause you to procrastinate or trying to just not deal with the stress. Sometimes
Yeah.
it can be healthy, other times it might not be a healthy solution.
Mhm.
But when it
Very
comes to
subjective. Some things work for one person, it doesn't work for the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you, for example, focus on this game and then you don't do your homework or your assignments, maybe you would just relieve the stress that like the source of the stress is your homework and your assignments, right? By playing this game, you alleviate the stress and say, oh my god, I can't speak. You alleviate the stress, and then you go back to the homework and the assignments, whatever, and you feel less stressed, and you can like focus on it better. Maybe even get better results at the end, get a good mark because you relieved that stress.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
agree. Like,
I
preventing
don't
stress.
agree
you do not.
because I
Oh.
think my point here is the cause of your stress, the homework, hasn't disappeared, right?
Mm-hmm.
All you've done is you've become less stressed for a period of time in that form of escapism, which, although I'm criticizing it, right? I do the same thing, like with books and stuff, right? Where I just get into a book and I read it. And then, but the thing is, once you're done with it, right? Once you're
Yeah.
done and you have to return to the real world and you gotta suddenly deal with the stress again. So
Mm-hmm.
the stress is still there because the cause of the stress hasn't changed. It's
Mm-hmm.
just for that period of time, you were kind of stress free playing your games. And for me, reading my books.
See, we have a word in English for that, Jeremy. It's called taking breaks. So
Yeah, we are
basically,
not autonomous robotic creatures that can just work on a day-to-day basis. And I think, granted, it's important to like find new ways to alleviate stress. Like you love reading and also lion dancing, and that's an excellent way. Now, obviously, we all have to return to reality by the end of the day, but not being in reality 24/7 in a way, it allows us to temporarily escape and recover much better.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah. So, like for example, I think all the forms of arts that we discussed about, whether it be digital art as well as animation and line dancing, these forms of arts are really what defines us as humans. Because, like the forms of arts, it's like a very wide range of human practices. I think of
Mhm.
like creative expression, storytelling, and cultural participation. And these unique ways of showing the way we think or our emotions, it's very sophisticated and also very unique as well. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a good way to relieve stress because there are different branches which you can just like find a way that would suit you the most or suit you the best.
Did
Yeah,
Maverick
I
ever
agree with that.
explain? Did Maverick ever explain what type of art he enjoys doing?
Yeah, you should
Well,
explain.
for me, it's animation.
Hmm.
It may not be like those flashy types of animation that for example, SpongeBob the anime. That's an actual video on YouTube. You could go search it if you want. You probably know what it is.
Yeah, that one
Um,
that one has a lot of passion put into it.
yeah,
Let's just
that
say.
one has like full on just voice acting. I don't know if it's like 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second. It doesn't matter. The quality is like extremely anime like.
Really
Full
impressive.
on Japanese dub and English dub. Japanese dub obviously has subtitles and a cool enough plot. Um, my animation is not like that. It's not that tier of godlike animation, but instead, I create custom animations of the game that Steven and I both play. It's I use a software that okay, so this software, it's it's called BCU. BC is the name of the game. It's the abbreviation of the name of the game, and then U is Ultimate. So BC Ultimate. I just refer to as BC Ultimate from now on. BC Ultimate. It started to the person who first designed it. His name is LCY. But we just call him Icy because the L is lowercase and it looks like an I. It looks like a capitalized I on his Discord username. So we just call him Icy. So Icy
Yeah.
started to design this program back in 2018, and I discovered it in 2019 when the fifth version of BC Ultimate was about to like come out. And I've been animating for over 2 years, almost three. No, well, technically, I discovered the software in 2019 of March, in March of 2019, and it's almost how long has it been? It's been a couple of years. It's been a couple of years. Um, and I've just been designing like my own custom enemies because I could go on and on about this for like an hour, I swear, but I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. So what I would do is first I would copy the animation of an already existing enemy within the game, and then I would look at its sprite sheet because every single enemy or unit that you have has a sprite sheet. Um, then I would export that sprite sheet into a third-party program, and then I would edit the sprite sheet, like recolor it, add any sort of accessories to the enemy, or maybe add some form of I don't know, an extra body part like wings or horns, an extra eye. I do not know. Those are just examples. And then I would import the sprite sheet back into the program, and then within the sprite sheet, there's these boxes that recognize. The box with ID1 is within this area, and then the box within ID2 is within this area. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's how I create sprite sheets. Then I have to create the model, which is the where the initial positions of the sprite sheets are. So if I were to place a sprite sheet at 0, 0, that's where the spreadsheet would be when I start animating. However, if I put it at x negative 100 and y negative 325, for example, that's where the spreadsheet would first start. So and then comes the animation, which is a whole entire other beast of its own. Point is, the animations, they usually take quite a while, so I don't usually finish an animation in one sitting. My point is, whenever I start to create these animations, it's like some form of, like Jeremy said, it's a form of escapism. I get to focus on the animation I'm creating. I need to see how I could make the animation like lifelike, because the enemies, they're all animals. They're mostly animals. So I need to have some form of reference in order to see how the animal actually moves.
Yeah, well, I guess I agree,
And
Maverick. Like because
somewhat.
somewhat. For
It's
example,
usually the
like
case.
certain animals that have obvious like features such as talons or beaks or claws, like it'd be obvious that their art style would be related to like their main ways of attacking. For example, like animalistic scratching or clawing at the characters we love. But some are really extreme, and those forms of arts are really hilarious, but also creative at times. Like for example, a squirrel just like opens half its body to like bite on an enemy. Like that's, I mean, yeah, bite on its opponent. Like that's really really funny. But
Yeah.
in that way, it's also expressing like that escapism reality. Like nothing has to be strictly contorting to what we see in real life.
It's
So I
called
agree with
artistic
that.
freedom.
Yeah, artistic freedom, exactly. So
Yeah.
please continue explaining, Maverick, because
Yeah,
I'm sure this
like
is
Jeremy said,
yeah.
there's a lot of artistic freedom that could go into this. Because I recently designed an animation, the first of its kind, for me. Uh, it's a small bear cub, and it has like a bow and arrow. So on its left hand, it carries a bow, and on its right hand, it carries an arrow. So the thing is, it has to draw back the arrow and then just release it. I've never designed an arrow trajectory or any form of bow animation. So I had to create three separate sprites for the is it called the bowstring? The thing you pull back on the bow.
Yeah, yeah, it's the
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I had to design three separate sprites for the bowstring. One is like just regular straight line bowstring, not touched, untouched. Second one's like pulled back slightly, and then the third one's just pulled back all the way. So I had to use like frame by frame tactics in order to give off the illusion that this bear is actually pulling it back when in reality it's just three separate frames. And then
Yes.
the thing is the arrow that the bear is holding in his right hand, it's parented to said right hand. Parenting is basically just you. How do I explain this? Basically, if you parent, for example, uh, a it's basically like joints. If you're parenting like a shoulder or an arm to like the torso of a of something you're designing, that part and all subsequent parts that are parented to that part will follow the like x and y positions, like rotations, any like any animation function. So if you were to make it like go up by 100 y units, If the torso goes up by 100 Y units, so will the arm, and so will the shoulder, the arm, the hand, the wrist, all of that. Um, it just makes animation easier. Uh, so right. The arrow was parented to the actual right hand of the bear. So when the bear when the bear's hand rotates, it has to rotate it. It has to rotate so that the arrow is um is on the actual bowstring, and then it has to pull back and then just let go. However, one difficulty I encountered with this animation is that the arrow was, again, it was parented. So when it was supposed to fire, it was supposed to have its own trajectory, but that wouldn't work because again, it's parented to the hand, so the hand would like
Oh
go
yeah.
back to its initial position, and the arrow would follow suit, and that would just mess everything up. So what I had to do was I had to create a dummy arrow, a dummy arrow in the place of the arrow that's parented to the hand when it was about to be fired. So at the exact frame that the arrow is supposed to be fired, the dummy arrow would appear, and then the arrow with that's parented to the hand would disappear. So it would seem like the arrow wasn't parented to the hand, and it would have its own trajectory. Then I just made it the own trajectory, like a parabolic trajectory, and then I made it like land somewhere, and then I made it like wiggle a bit for like some form of realism. And then the another arrow just conjures in the bear's hand after the dummy arrow that was fired lands and disappears.
Interesting.
So it's all very intricate, and you really have to think what you have to do in order to get the results that you want. And it's also a form of art that I feel like can really just reduce a lot of stress from me because it's doing something I like. It's doing something I'm passionate about. I don't plan to go into animation in the future, but it's just a hobby. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a
It's my
hobby.
mind off things.
How many frames do you think is on average in your animations?
Oh boy. um. Oh god. Okay. I've created a lot, and I mean a lot of animations. Um. So I am not too sure because I've been when I first started making my custom animation starts, I made boss animations. So I would design these very powerful boss enemies, and I would just like put them in levels. So bosses usually have to have some form of like cool attack animation and cool moving animation, and they have to seem like very unique and very like boss like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, or else it wouldn't be a
Yeah,
true boss.
Yeah,
of
it
course.
wouldn't be like intimidating. You see the bosses in the other video games, they all have some form of uniqueness to them.
Yeah,
And
they're decorated in a way. They're decorated with over decorated details, but in that way, it gives them like a beautiful simplicity of
Mhm.
design. So I can see where you're
Yeah.
getting at.
Yeah, so my first ever custom animation was of this reindeer that I called Wendigo. It was a black reindeer, and to attack it raised itself on its hind legs, and then it just slams its front legs down onto the ground, creating like this massive splash of dirt. Um, so that was my first ever animation. I think that animation was 150 frames, which is really isn't a lot because that's only 5 seconds. Because the game that we're talking about, BC Ultimate, follows the mechanics of regular BC, and in regular BC, the game runs at 30 frames per second. So obviously, if you divide 150 by 30, you get five. So that was
Yes.
only 5 seconds. However, the the very next one after Wendigo, it's a like archaic version of a squid, of a calamari. Um, calamari, it's supposed to it has crystals orbiting around it, in a triangular formation, and it will like will these crystals up into the air above it, and then they would like slowly get further and further away from each other, and a ball of light would appear in the middle, and then eventually the ancient calamari would just throw that large beam of light onto the ground, and then it would just explode in a massive radius. Uh, so obviously that took way longer to do, and that animation would be like much longer in length. So I think that was 300 frames, 330, I think. No, wait. Maybe it was up to 400. I'm not too sure. um but to date, that's the longest animation I've ever created.
Oh
And
wow.
recently
Basically, it varies a lot.
it varies a lot. And
Yeah.
because like recently I've been creating like these regular reoccurring enemies. Enemies that aren't just bosses. They appear in multiple levels. That's why they're called reoccurring. And these enemies they usually like less than 100 frames. Maybe less than 90, maybe less than 80 maybe. It's usually the bosses that take up more than 100 frames. Because the reoccurring enemies they usually have a very simple attack most of the time. So it varies. There really is no average unless I go to calculate it right now, which I'm much too lazy to do.
Yeah, don't do that.
So yeah, that is the very very basic gist of animation. Took me 6 months to learn the animation itself. So yeah,
Any other hobbies you guys want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, adding on to Maverick, like there's some like limitations at times when making art, and even though we want to express our inner desires, like there's just some things that we can't express. Like for example, imagine a wolf in your head right now. Like you know what details it has, you know what it wants, but then as soon as you put your hand on the paper, you're like, oh man, I don't know how to draw this thing. So that's already limitation one. And ironically, another limitation sometimes is technology itself. I finished a piece of fan art recently, and that one, well, let's say I'm pretty satisfied with it. But the main problem was that the file size was for some reason 7 gigabytes. It was
my
absolutely
God.
massive for a
Uh,
digital. And my computer started heating up and it started overheating and said there was no more space to create the thing that I envisioned. And so, under these circumstances, I didn't know what to do because obviously there's something I want to complete, but then there's like this new stress arising, like I have to contort to inner limitations when in reality, this art is supposed to ironically represent the freedom of expression and freedom of thoughts.
Yeah,
So, I didn't know what to do, but ultimately the thing that I resorted to was compressing the file of the drawing in order to like stay within the boundaries but also express my artistic thinking.
mhm.
So I definitely understand Maverick and the challenges between the animation but
Mhm.
also between art itself. And I think one of
Yes.
the main ways to reflect on it is through something that we all share, like we all love art. So yes, I agree.
Yeah,
dude,
limitation of art. That's why you use references. There's a bunch of references you can find online,
Yeah.
and that's how I drew like the bow that the bear was holding. Because I didn't know how to draw a bow. I didn't know the proportions of a bow, so I needed to have some form of reference in order to you know get a good feel of how a bow is supposed to be designed, how it's supposed to be handled, how you're supposed to hold it, and how you're supposed to shoot. So there is all of that you need to take into account.
I
Yeah.
think ironically, one of the strengths of art is being able to express things that can't really be expressed in other areas of knowledge, such as in the sciences.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, you're right in that.
I agree. Like, for example, there's art in science in a way, but is there science in art? Not so much, even though there is. Like, for example, different chemicals blending together create different pigments and colors. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, that one's more about your thinking rather than
Mhm.
thinking about what is lying behind that logic. And art technically is a human construct. So when we're using something that is very abstract and not even physically real, the things that we do create that are physically real are just representations or reflections of
Right.
what we see.
And then again, people can interpret abstract art in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I feel like abstract artists usually they create a piece of art that represents one thing, but then the majority of people see it as another thing. So that's it's all art is all very subjective, I'd say, especially
I
in the abstract part.
I think it's important to remember that the logical parts of sciences are used to evaluate the arts. Because if all art was subjective, then certain pieces of art wouldn't be worth
Yeah.
more than others.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's fair.
Like for example, one form of art, it was just a orange blob on a canvas, and that one sold for like what $60 million. And when you think about people who can draw things insanely realistic and an accurate depiction, one would think sometimes, why would this orange blob cost $60 million? And I
Someone had
think,
an entire white
yeah,
canvas, like nothing on it. It's just a blank canvas, and that sold. I don't know how much that sold for, but it sold.
yeah, exactly. Like that was just nuts.
Some people think it's ludicrous that such things would sell for such high prices. There's the argument that says I could do this in 5 minutes myself. I should become an artist, but it's just very hard to.
It wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I suppose. Like
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
there's a form of like reputation. Like artists, they all have some form of reputation, whether good or bad, right? If some nobody just comes out of nowhere and just puts a very abstract piece of art, maybe they'll gain instant recognition. But in my opinion, a lot of the time they'll just go unnoticed. People will be like, "Hey, what's this?" But then, ironically, they'll go to some other artist with great renown and who creates some form of abstract art, and they'll be like, "Wow, wow, amazing, great." So I feel like reputation can also play a factor in here.
Who knows? Maybe those abstract art pieces being sold for lots of money is just some part of a money laundering scheme.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah, I agree.
Oh.
And I especially think that the various forms of art definitely allow us to express different ways, and sometimes they can be extremely frustrating. Like, I really, really love sculptures, but I just can't seem to draw like people on paper. And I think that one is like very important when reflecting on it because like I really love like collecting hobbies, but that's another way of stress will do it. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's really important to create different forms of arts to reflect the way we think.
So what have we concluded here today?
Well, I'd like to say like we basically discussed how we cope with stress. Although I do want to mention like we're no experts in stress, right? These are our own individual
Right.
experiences with stress. So I feel like we should probably consult with a more official source and maybe compare it to what we're doing.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
for example, I think the Canadian Mental Health Association, I think, wrote about stress and
Yes.
kind of, the ways to deal with it. So a bunch of vague things like identify the problem, solve problems as they come up, talk about your problems. I think these ones, right? We're kind of doing it now in the podcast
Mhm.
itself, right? We're kind of talking about our stress and what we're doing to deal with it. And
Mhm.
yeah, um,
Well, unfortunately, I find some of these things downright laughable, and this might sound very sensitive, but I think there are definitely ways for them to improve their ways of helping stress with people. Like, for example, one of the most common ways of dealing with stress is, well, at least they say, is simplify your life. And I quote, stress can come up when there are too many things going on. Learning to say no is a real skill that takes practice. Try to look for ways that make your to do list more manageable. But I've noticed that recently there are things that you cannot just simply say no to. There are
Yeah.
certain deadlines you have to honor. There are certain deadlines you have to like commit to, and all these things are very important to like manage. And so instead of saying no, I think it's more important to contort to it or be more flexible rather than simplifying it. I think it should be adapting. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that. I feel like
At
they
the
could. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
at the end of the day, you have a limited amount of time, and I guess although you can't always say no, you can sort of talk to yourself and be like, where do I how do I want to prioritize this? Is this more important than this?
Mhm.
So you might not be able to say no, but you can at least decide which one you want to complete first.
Mhm. I feel like the what they're saying on the website is very it's very like you guys said, it's very vague, but also kind of dismissive in a sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they could definitely improve on that, but in my opinion, I feel that it's an okay start, I guess. It's very vague, but I feel like it's intentionally vague in order to encompass a lot of options.
Yeah, I agree. But
There's like
like
a
you
lot of spots you could branch out from.
but you know,
Mhm.
we're not the experts here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a typo right on the very thing that's supposed to help Ontario citizens deal with stress. If you guys go
Oh
to
no.
right below what is stress, it says stress is the body S response. Like, I think they should try to find a better way to deal with stress instead of like making it seem like it's something that people all share. Of course, people have different levels of stress, which is why it's so important to have like specific strategies. And ultimately, some of these things are very helpful, but there are some things that people obviously know already. I think
Mhm.
what they should do is encourage people dealing with like severe stress or even mild stress to like how do they deal with that certain level, because not everyone experiences the same amount of stress on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, instead of being redundant and giving out redundant information, I mean they're a health association after all. Maybe they could give better advice. So,
Well,
Granted,
my opinion.
yeah.
what advice would you give?
What advice would I give? Hey man, you can't ask me. I'm not the expert here.
Well, I'm no expert, but I can certainly try to explain what I would give to other people experiencing stress. And ultimately, that one would honestly be time management. Rather than simply saying no, you would say, yes, this thing is inevitable, but I will definitely use my time wisely to do the things I can enjoy and do the things I won't. And procrastination, for example, that's very common in our generation, but we can find different ways to manage time to not only alleviate our stress, also get the things that we need to do done.
hmm Sometimes it's the effort that counts because obviously it's way easier said than done to just manage your time well. It's much easier maybe elaborate like maybe have a schedule on a day-to-day basis. At the end of each week, you could create a schedule for next week, just like a general schedule, what you'll do from time X to time Y, something like that. Just have some sort of calendar
When you
to manage
procrastinate
your time.
making your schedule so you can procrastinate doing the work.
Oh my god. Oh my
Oh my
god. It
goodness.
never
Yeah.
ends. It never ends. Uh, but yeah, my point is it's easier said than done, but sometimes it's the effort that counts. Uh yeah. Sometimes it's the effort that counts.
I think
Mhm.
one of the better pieces of advice they have here is get active and doing a physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of hard to actively maintain a good mental health. And I think maintaining a physical health is something you can actively do in the moment in order to help with your mental health. So I think at least that's a good piece of advice.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep. So overall, we experience different levels of stress, and we talked about the ways that we deal with stress. So thank you very much for showing me your ways of dealing with it, and I really enjoy talking about it. And hopefully, our viewers can understand how we experience it, but also deal with it in our daily lives.
Hopefully we help some people. I don't know if we did, but hopefully we help some people maybe find a new way to get to be less stressed. Not too
Well, I'm
sure,
certain,
but
yeah, because talking to you guys, that already allows me to understand what everyone's experiencing. And who knows, maybe I'll try lion dancing, reading, animation, and video games in the future as well. So there's always new forms to explore.
And if you guys found this podcast helpful, feel free to share it with other people you know.
Yes, I agree.
I agree too. That concludes episode 1 of the Wrong Opinion podcast. If you listen to the end, thank you so much. We will likely be doing more episodes in the future.